C.S. Lewis was a respected author, but his logic is just all wrong in many cases. He's quoted as saying, Christianity, if false, is of no importance, but if true, of infinite importance. First off, you could say that about any religious claim, that if it's true, then that would be important. However, it's not the case that if it is false, that it is of a false importance. If it is false, then the LGBT community is being discriminated against for no reason. If it is false, people are giving their hard-earned money to the church for nothing. None of this tells us whether or not Christianity is true, though. If you can make a strong case in favor of Christianity, then please give us a call, because the show, it's starting now. Welcome, everyone. Today is February 11th, 2024, and I'm your host, Jim Barrows, and joining me today is Armin Navabi. How's it going, Armin?
Good. How are you?
You know, it's kind of rainy and cloudy, but doing pretty good. Got out and got some sun yesterday out on the beach, so, you know, the weekend's not all bad.
I could tell. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little on the red side. Yeah, the water was cold, though. The water was 60, and I'm like, you know what? We could have gone to a spring and gotten 68-degree water instead of the 60-degree ocean water, but, you know, the beaches aren't nearly as good. So the Atheist Experience is a product of the Atheist Community of Austin, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to the promotion of atheism, critical thinking, secular humanism, and the separation of religion and government. And we've got the results of last week's Share Your Experience question of the week. And that question was, what is an example of God's sense of humor? And our top three are, in the number 3 position from Miranda Rensberger, 6919. Example of God's humor: Greg Locke's church tent was damaged by snow. A whole bunch of snowflakes destroyed the hate preacher's church. And it's not the first time that church has been destroyed. So if we were to take some of the things that he said, and that God only destroys things he doesn't like, yeah, sorry, Pastor Locke, you're done. Number 2, Bo Bros, 416. God's sense of humor is in the irony of nailing a carpenter to some wood. I could see that, yeah. Number 1, from V. Van Huculum. God's sense of humor would be a Siamese twin where one is destined for hell and the other for heaven. That's actually a really good question. Do Siamese twins have 2 souls or 1? How do you determine that? Is that 2 souls? But how would you determine that? By brain?
No, but the concept of soul, like everyone's identity, apparently in Abrahamic religions, every 2 different individuals have 2 different souls. So, I mean, soul is a meaningless concept, but that's how they would describe it.
Right, but you don't have 2 separate individuals, right? In a Siamese twin, there's only, I mean, they share large portions of the body structure, so.
Yeah, well, the soul is not your brain, the soul is not your body, the soul is not your experiences, the soul is not your mind, the soul is something completely different. And if you keep trying to figure out what it is, you will get nowhere. I've tried that. I've been talking about what the idea of a soul is, because they can tell you what it's not, but they have a hard time telling you what it is. Yeah, that makes it difficult. So, but anyway, if you are a theist or Christian and you're listening in, and you got a way to tell how many souls a Siamese twin has, call in too. Let us know, because we don't have any idea. And the prompt for this week is complete the sentence. It was cringe when God blank. So what do you think, Armin? It was cringe when God. I'm just going to go to my usual answer. Making masturbation a sin, given that it has no harm whatsoever that we could think of, unless you're addicted to it. Like, making that a sin is just like, why? Like, it makes no sense. It's pure cringe. Like, making something so pleasurable and also telling people, yeah, it's a sin. And you're like, why? It doesn't harm anybody. You're like, just because it is. No other reason. That's cringe.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty cringe. Yeah. I'm anxious to see what our audience comes up with. In the comment section, give us your best answer and tune in next week where we reveal the top 3 So what do you think, Armin? Are we ready to start taking some calls?
Yes, let's do it. Let's do it. I'm
All
excited.
right, let's start with Becky in Colorado, who wants to know, how do we know if the Gospels are firsthand accounts or not? Hey, Becky, how's it going?
Hi. Well, that was fast. I'm first. Doing okay. I'm in between theism and atheism. It was pretty fast. I'm still working on it, though, because, say, my granddaughter, I just took down this large picture that I had of Passion of the Christ that came down from my family for generations. I haven't read a lot of the Bible, but so my granddaughter, she looked at that. I hadn't had a chance to tell her that much about it, but moving things they just make me cry for just at the drop of a hat. So I started to cry, but I started to explain it to her. She said, "What's wrong with that man?" is what she said. "What's wrong with that man?" And so I started to explain it to her, and I was very moved, and I was like, "Damn, she's 6 years old. This is scary." So I took it down, and I've been thinking about all this stuff ever since. Yeah. She said, "What's wrong with that man?" is what she said.
Right.
What's wrong?
I'm getting
So-
a little echo. So, go on, Jim.
So
Yeah, I was getting that echo was coming from me, and I apologize.
So you've been saying that the Gospels are like a game of telephone. They're not written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're not written by those guys. So how do you know that there's all these different authors?
And that's a good question. And part of the answer is we go back to the manuscripts that we do have, and we compare those, and we can see that we have very, very different writing styles, word choices, and things like that. And we can compare and do things like, we know that Matthew is like 80-90% of Mark, and where Matthew differs, he is basically correcting Mark. So we know that those two manuscripts are almost exactly the same. And so is that really two different ones? But we also know, because when we go back to some early church fathers, we see them quote parts of the four Gospels, but they never refer to them by their name. And in other cases where they're quoting other people, they do quote the name or the author of the quote. In this case, some of these folks are anonymous, even to the early church fathers. We don't see a name on any of them until like the 2nd century, until much later. And there's some folks who are looking at these going, the first sentence of, and I forget which Gospels they are off the top of my head, could be the actual title because of the way they're worded, and a scribal error put them as the first sentence rather than the title. So there's a lot of things, but the bottom line is that we just don't know. I mean, if we're being generous, the earliest Gospels we have go back to 40 or 50, which is pretty much a lifetime back then, pretty close to it. Considering that the apostles were, in their 20s at that point, right? Maybe a little bit younger, but what happened in between that, right? We're people's memories fade. We can go back and talk to people who were at Woodstock and find that their memories don't exactly coincide with what happened there. We can look at a lot of these issues, and memories fade, memories change as people talk about things. Memories that aren't there become solidified and things like this. And so even if you grant the early 40, 50 time frame, that's a lot of time, even if those are the real authors, for their memories to be not quite what they should have been. Just somebody, and I'm not saying anybody is deliberately doing this. I'm just saying this is the way human brains work, right?
Yeah.
So they may be accurate, but how accurate are they? We also know that people are often easily misled by common magic tricks. The water in the wine thing is really, really easy to do. You just need a trick pitcher and you can do it. It's done today. So that's how, there's a whole lot of cloud around who actually wrote them. There's a whole lot of cloud around how accurate they could possibly be to what actually happened. And then you can look at things like Mark has almost no supernatural elements in it, and John has a whole heck of a lot more. So as time passes, John's generally considered to be later than Mark. The fish gets bigger in fish stories, right? It goes from being a little tiny thing to a great big thing. And so legend gets added, even by storytellers. So we don't know how it actually does that. How accurate those are. And I know you're talking about how your daughter was asked what's wrong with that beaten and bloody man, and taking it down. That is kind of we don't like showing that kind of stuff on TV, and yet Christians seem to want to throw that all over the place, right? We don't allow TV news to show things like that. Why are we doing it? Just for Christianity, right? It's like Christianity gets a pass for that.
It's something I've had for years. Just something I've had for years, and it never struck me this way. Yeah.
Right. And we don't, right? We don't see the torture we don't see torture as being okay. We don't just see torture being displayed as okay. So why all of a sudden do we have that? And what does it really prove? I mean, what is the purpose behind it?
I never before thought about the fact that, an omniscient God, if we do something wrong, needs to be seriously forgiven. Why all the rigmarole and I need a sacrifice? Doesn't that make him just like all the gods that need a sacrifice? All the gods throughout history that have needed sacrifices.
Becky, may I answer the question that you called in for? Based on how I think, Okay, so you asked, how do we know if the Gospels are first-hand accounts or not, right? So if you look at, this is basically a question that historians usually try to answer, right? So, and if you go look it up, you will see that they have a very detailed methodology, right? This is a very good question, and many experts have been working for years to try to answer that question in as much detail as possible. And they have been, if you go look into their methodologies, you would be so impressed about how much thinking has gone behind the question that you're asking. Sounds like a simple question, but the answer is what academics have been working on for years, right? So it's a very important, it's not just about the Gospels, it's about so many other claims that historical figures have been making, both kings, emperors, other historians throughout history. How do we know if the things that they're writing are not just made up or is accurate? So there's a science, to this. There's a methodology to this, and when you go and study how much work goes into this, you realize that people just making claims that, this is first-hand account, the Gospels are first-hand account, how easy people just accept that. But in academia, this is a very serious question. That is, you cannot just accept a claim like that without actually going in digging. But again, I'm not a historian, but based on what I've seen, I think having cross references is very important from other people who have been also making similar claims from that era. So for example, if Julius Caesar goes and writes about his war campaigns or somewhere, they go and cross-reference that to other people, what they've seen, what they've recorded. That's one thing, but that's just one. There's many different metrics, and there's a lot of standards that you have to pass for you to be able to for historians to take your testimony seriously, or you seriously as somebody. Even some people who are serious, they know that sometimes they exaggerate, sometimes they make up stuff because they're biased. So even people that they know that their record, like what they're writing is about something that has actually happened, the historians don't just accept all the details that has been written. So it's amazing that without all those standards, just Christians would just accept the Gospels as first-hand account, right? So if you actually go look at the standards, you will see that the Gospels meet like none of them, but the Gospels do meet the standards of other texts that we know that are made up. Like it does. I mean, just what Jim was talking to you about, it was like the natural progression of, you see the evolution of the text. And if you try to make sense of this text as some actual people who saw something that and wrote it down, it doesn't fit the framework. It doesn't fit this, the criteria for that kind of text. But it does fit. It does match other texts that we know in history where people are making up stories and exaggerating it from one year to another, and making it meet their own political needs. Yeah.
What are these other texts? Are you talking about from Egyptians or Aztecs or?
No, I mean, even in that era, you could see. Oh, go ahead, Jim. Jim wants to say something.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're looking at the Hellenistic area and Hellenistic Jews, their standards, how they write fiction and how they write things that aren't, and how they write history. There are things that they did and things that they didn't do for the most part. And the Gospels tend to follow the not historical texts in terms of the way they're written. And while not all historical texts from that time period have authors, a lot of them do. So that's kind of an interesting little bit. Also, that the Gospels were pretty much written in what is considered higher educated Greek. And so it seems very, very odd that if this was supposed to be a history, that it's not written that way. Also, Luke, the first couple paragraphs are Luke admits he's putting stories together. So that can't be eyewitness by definition, right? So there's some issues there. But yeah, when you start looking at the broader spectrum of stuff that was written at the time, and you start looking at how the Jewish people were becoming more Hellenized, and Romanized in that area,
Hellenized.
then it starts.
What does that mean?
So yeah, when you just the adopting aspects of Greek and Roman culture to include borrowing stories, both of religious and secular nature, and that just goes beyond dress, but speech and the ways of thinking. We don't start to see this, we talk about a motif like the dying and rising God, and that is a motif in much the same way that science fiction will use, we got to fix the whatchamacallit with the what's so that we can go wherever we're going. That's a motif. And so it doesn't point to stories being fictional, but it does make it kind of interesting to see how stories change, meld, and merge through time. And at the time that 2,000 years ago, when Jesus was supposed to be walking around, the Jews were fighting becoming Hellenized, having Greek aspects of culture invade their own, as well as Roman as well. So there's some really interesting things when you start looking at the big picture of what's going on in the Middle East at the time, in terms of culture and writing and what was being discussed.
So to make this simple, Becky, to make this simple, like imagine if you have like a cult or a new sect and a new sect of a more dominant religion. Well, let's call it B, right? And this B is now just newly developing. And then there's another couple ones out there. Like let's say there's another sect that is competing with it that is called C. And both B and C are in this environment where there's a dominant culture and a dominant way of storytelling and narratives that is called A, right? And B and C are competing, and B, like, let's say it's like Christianity's early days. And you can see that B and C are like throughout time, their texts are their deities or their main guy is becoming more and more impressive, right? And this is in an environment where you could see evidence that they're competing with each other. And then you could also see B's way of storytelling is fitting more and more with the way that the dominant culture, like Hellenization, for example, like the A culture that is dominant, is like fitting that structure. And it's the way that the stories are being told seems to be for an audience that is more interested in A stories, A type stories, right? So if you observe all of this, you can I see what's happening here. Like you could come up with an understanding, like you can see that. So this B, the stories that is coming out of B is probably not history. It's probably based on when I put everything together, I could see that there's a sect, it's a new sect, it's competing with other sects, and the main guy is trying to compete with other sects to show our guy is more impressive than your guy. And it's also trying to appeal to a broader audience that likes stories to be told in a method of A. Do you understand? This is what's happening. It seems like what's happening here if you put everything together. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's beginning to make sense. So we're talking about things that happen in the Middle East, and we're talking then about Christianity, Jewish also, and Islam, and that's in the Middle East. So how did it get to England? And then, of course, we know how it went from England to the United States. That's a given. But going from the Middle East to England, that's kind of weird.
The Romans, okay, so the Romans at some point decided to make this the religion of their empire, right? Because of a power play. And the Romans ruled like they had all of Europe. And that's how it got from the Middle East to England, because the Romans were ruling over everything, including England. Is that accurate, Jim?
Okay.
Just a simple.
Yeah. Stories change by word of mouth. And they change a lot. And storytellers will often change a story to make it more local and therefore more interesting to the people they're telling the story to. So those are all things that happen as well. But, you know, we've been talking for quite a bit, Becky. What's going through your head?
Yeah. Well, now I'm seeing, I have no idea why this is so cemented that at this point, here in the U.S., we can barely read a whole book, and yet we're just taking it on faith. How did we get stuck? When did we get stuck in this?
When the Pilgrims first came over.
Years.
Yeah, I mean it's not just not just the U.S. As like Armin was saying, it's been happening throughout Europe, and you know, once the Roman emperor took the faith, that's when it really takes off. We see two instances of the Romans creating laws making it punishable by death to not believe. And the quality of the Roman violence is at the time was unequaled. And so when they spread Roman, and that's just kind of the way it happens. And if we don't question as a child, we trust our parents. Our parents get proven right many times. And so we come to trust our parents as authority figures and knowing what they're talking about. And on it goes, until someone says, hey, wait a minute, and starts thinking.
Yeah. Do we hardly have a choice as tiny people? Yes.
Yeah. And then you have to start asking questions at some point, right? And you start going, why do I believe this? What's the evidence?
This is, by the way, Becky, this is how we humans have been mostly deciding what to believe in for the past 10, 12, or even longer. Actually, no, way longer. Thousands. It's been thousands and thousands of years. This is not a new thing. It's only recently that there's a good portion of the population who is trying to consider maybe questioning, faith. So if you're surprised, like, how do we just accept these things and go? Like, this is not a new thing. Like, throughout history, this is how we decided to believe things. Most of us, not more than the vast majority of us. Yeah.
So,
It's how our mind operates.
Just started noticing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Go. Anyways, Becky, if you don't have any, Jim, I think we should go to other callers, unless Becky.
Sure.
I just
Becky, do you have any other questions?
Becky, one last thing. Let me just tell you one. Becky, wait, Becky, one last thing. If you are concerned about children watching Jesus being tortured, like seeing the tortured body of Jesus, if you think that's problematic for children to see, the concept of hell and teaching that to children is that times a million.
Oh, yes.
I think. Yeah. All right.
Did you have any other questions for us, Becky?
Yes.
Did you have any other questions for us?
Later on, perhaps we can talk about how now that we are able to do things like dye our hair in non-human colors and maybe shave it off and put on all kinds of ornaments and whatnot, how being animals, we do not now look like animals. Is that a given?
Well, I think we're still animals. Whether or not we look like them is up for debate by putting various jewelry and changing hair color. Animals do things to make themselves look better to their mates. So we have more tools than they do.
Yeah, we have way more tools. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
I will let you
Becky.
move on then. Okay.
All right. Thanks, Becky.
Thank you, Becky. Thank you.
Bye. Okay. Just a couple of announcements. Hopefully everybody knows that we've got a channel that houses all of the shows of the ACA in audio podcast form. You can find that at tiny.cc/AEN podcasts. There you can listen to all the latest shows from the Atheist Experience, Talk Heathen, Truth Wanted, Nonprofits, and others, all on one channel. And you can send us a super chat, and we'll read as many as we can, and you can make us say almost anything, as long as it's not bigoted, racist, misogynistic, things like that. We won't say. We will ridicule you for it, so if you want to be ridiculed, go ahead and try and make us say something along those lines. But if you want us to say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious 15 times, send us a super chat or something even sillier. Let your imaginations run wild. And the ACA wants you to know what is going on in our community. And for that, we've got an updated website. Head over to www.atheist-community.org, where you can learn about the organization itself, our policies, and how you can get involved. And also, Armin and I would not be here right now bumping our gums talking to people if it wasn't for these amazing people we call our crew, and they put this show together, and these guys are absolutely wonderful, and we literally couldn't do this. Just before we got started, we ran into a couple of interesting tech issues, and they were solving them, and Armin and I were just sitting here just kind of babbling on. So we get a picture. There's the crew from all over the place. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much. We appreciate it. And we're going to take David next in Washington. So go ahead, David.
Oh, hello, and thank you so much for taking my call, Jim and Armin. It is so good to have the opportunity to speak to you today. A couple of weeks ago, while Jim was co-hosting with Secular Rarity, a fleeting comment had been made, and I just wanted to speak to that if I could for a moment. Jim had said that, and when you use the past tense, so I don't know if this was a reference to prior to your deconversion or if this was a more current state of affairs.
Yeah, it was prior to.
You had stated, okay, I understand that. But you had said that at the time that you did not feel that being gay, homosexuality, was natural, although you didn't have a problem with it. I just wanted to point out to you that every animal species on Earth, whether we're talking about penguins or cats or fish, all have species members of the same sex that enter into partnerships with one another, and sometimes especially in the case of that.
Yeah.
Every,
I hesitate to say the word every because all it takes is one to prove us wrong. I would say most of the ones I'm aware of do. And whatever you do, do not Google dolphin sex. Just don't do it.
I'm doing that right now.
I'll make it a point not to. Thank you. I appreciate
yeah, and they also, and by our standards, they also have perverted sex quite a bit. And some monkeys don't really care which way. If two monkeys want to go have sex, they go do it. We just don't. Yeah, we see it all over the place. It's not a. It's much more natural than people think it is, and more so than I thought so 30, 40 years ago. Good.
But what if, okay, I have a question though, but what if it wasn't natural? Who cares? Like if it's not, like let's say it's not natural. Let's say humans were the only animals who are having gay sex and it's fun for people who enjoy it and it's not harming anybody and it's not natural. Does it matter if it's not natural? If it wasn't natural?
It matters. Well, if I may, I hate to interrupt you in mid-sentence, Armin. Please forgive me. I don't want to be rude to you.
I finished my sentence.
Yes, please. Sorry.
Go ahead.
My
sentence was finished. Go on. Like you didn't interrupt me.
Okay, gotcha.
We're running into a little bit of delay issue.
Gotcha. Right now, our rights are under a lot of attack in the United States. There's an entire political party that pretty much wants to make life as difficult as possible for us, and another party that has given something of a tepid response to defending us. And it's frightening to be a gay man in America right now. I'm 51 years old, and I've seen things go from a period of time where I had zero civil rights up to a point where it seemed like very quickly I was gaining a lot of civil rights. And now it looks like a lot of those rights might be taken away again. And the argument over whether it's natural or not oftentimes is part of that discussion, because the people that want to take those civil rights away, and some of whom would be very happy to kill me because of my sexual orientation, do so on the basis of the argument of it not being natural. And that's the reason why that word is something that is something that causes my ears to perk up, is because I'm so used to hearing the folks suggest that it's not, be the folks that are carrying the torches and, or like, like say I live in the greater Seattle area, and very recently there's a bar that had a drag night, not even a regular drag event, just one night. And somebody shot up the window of the Rent and Tap House, and there's a drag bar up on Capitol Hill, which is our neighborhood in Seattle, where somebody pulled a gun and was waving it at the patrons. Thankfully, they managed to get out of his hands before anybody was hurt. But the fact that the gun was pulled is pretty terrifying. And, it's such a frightening time that, when I hear that phrase, it's not natural, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to.
I think we get that. And it is, it's an absolutely terrifying time right now for David, for the LGBTQIA community. And I'm sorry if I made it sound like that I was not an ally, and I definitely am, and that my views have definitely changed. I do recognize now that it is completely natural, and that people need to understand that. They need to get away from these very, very old Bronze Age beliefs and realize that even in the Bronze Age, there were societies who were absolutely okay with people being gay. They just weren't in the Middle East.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. You go back to
David,
ancient Egypt, there. Oh, yes. Sorry, Armin. Yes.
No, it's okay. I think we're just dealing with a little bit of a delay. I just wanted to also mention that I didn't mean to say that we shouldn't point that it's natural. Obviously, it is natural, and we should point that out. But at the same time, can we also let's use that argument. Let's keep telling that to people. But I also want to. Do you acknowledge that there are many things that we have that is amazing? Many of the best things that we have are not natural. So not being natural, even if it wasn't natural, like at least here among us, like I'm not saying don't go around and exercise the idea that it's not natural, but can we acknowledge among us at least that even if it was natural, if it wasn't natural, it would be completely fine?
Absolutely correct, 1,000%. I mean, let's face it, there are some things that are very natural that aren't good for you, like deadly nightshade, very natural, grows in the forest, wouldn't recommend eating it. But natural these days, because it is used for political purposes, and it is really the politics of the situation that's terrifying me. Like, I'm a nurse by profession. I wish I could only focus on nursing and learn how to be the best nurse on earth and let that be the only thing that I worry about. But now I have to learn all about law and all about politics and about the political process, because all of my rights are in danger of disappearing in a flash, depending on who wins a given election. And I never wanted to know this much about the political system. I really wanted to be able to just say, who cares about any of it, and just move on and focus on other things. But I don't have that choice, because there are people who legitimately want to kill me, and want to use the power of the state to do it,
Right.
So,
yeah.
And
while the LGBTQIA community is target number one, if the current political parties that are backing this, when they get done with you guys, are coming for atheists next. So we can't sit back on our laurels by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, it's very scary at how fast these things are going backwards, and how quickly a lot of us are going to be on the wrong end of a gun here soon if we're not careful.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your support, guys. And I'm so sorry to have taken up so much time here on the program.
Oh, no worries.
Just wanted to call this one issue. And thanks so much. I greatly appreciate your support. And, I love the show. So thanks again.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for calling in.
Thank you, David. Stay safe.
Thank you again. Bye.
That was dark.
Yeah, that will get a little darker than I wanted, but it's also all very, very true. Let's see. Let's take Chris in North Carolina, who says that he got divorced in his hyper-religious town, and now his spouse outed you. Oh. So are you safe?
Yeah. How you doing? My name's Chris.
Hey, Chris.
Hi.
Hey, great to meet
safe?
you, Armin. Jim. Yeah, actually, it's not only extreme MAGA, but they are hyper-religious. And I actually am kind of confused, because all of my neighbors done me, and it's like having cooties like when we were a kid. I just literally have no frame of reference.
Right.
And I'm in medical, and I have many patients, and already it's like this is like the scourge. And I'm in a small eastern North Carolina town, just nothing here. And so I was wondering, did you guys have any tips? I've never actually walked amongst the people carrying torches from Frankenstein's castle. How do you deal with, what can you say to neighbors when they just look at you, and no matter how right you are in a divorce, they look at you and think, but you're an atheist.
Yeah.
That bad. Is moving an option?
Well, I got a mother who lives a couple of houses down, and she says, I've been disinvited to Canasta and all these things. She's like in her 80s. And she said, wow. How do you deal with this? And I said, Mom, it's being gay is nothing here for me. But suddenly not believing in an invisible deity, it is probably the most caustic thing to my socialization in my neighborhood. And I just figured, everybody comes out as atheists at some point, or at least you try to rationalize with people. However, I find that just going through a divorce, even my attorney said, it could work against you. And I said to myself, an attorney, separation of church and state. But she said, well, you have to get the right judge. So even though I'm solid, that one item worked against me. What do you guys think?
I haven't been in that situation, and I don't really know. I could recommend Recovering from Religion or Secular Therapy Project. Hitting the atheist community of Discord, any of the show chats on Facebook, and trying to talk through and see what you can actually do. But if people aren't willing to talk to you or give you a chance, and all of a sudden they've changed their opinion of you from, hey, he's a really good guy, to, oh my God, I can't talk to him, I'm not sure what you can do without being able to communicate to them. I suppose from a certain point of view, there are two ways you can go. You could fake it until they realize, you could fake it until they come back and start talking to you again. Or you could just throw it in their faces and be as friendly as possible and put, Atheist Experience TV show stickers on the back of your car and, other stickers, and just throw it in their faces until they realize. But I don't know. Armin, do you got any ideas?
Yeah. So I want to clarify something. So what happened? Are they still talking to you and they just have questions, or are they being mean to you?
No, I asked.
Is this hurting you?
Well, I asked for a divorce, and forgive me, Arvid. I asked for a divorce, and then he went literally door to door, just telling everybody I was a rabid atheist, and suddenly.
Right.
I realized people who I would speak with every day, Arvin, were just mean. I had people, I just walked by the mailbox. It doesn't matter. They don't even talk. They turn their backs. And I said to myself, I know they're religious to some degree, and they used to have a lot of Trump signs in the yard, but to this degree, I've never felt, I put in hips and knees in half of them. And now I have just cooties. And I just, I'm mid-50s, and I don't know how to.
Okay, you know your town better than we do. But what would happen if you just go extra nice with everybody and just show up and, I don't know, maybe come at their doors with cakes and be extra nice to everybody, try to help out, call people up and ask them, hey, so-and-so, I haven't talked to you for a while. Do you need help with anything? And I don't know, just trying to go on a charm offensive. Would that work? I think it's
a great idea. I'm just, I don't see myself with a plate of brownies going knocking on the door, but I can try. I just didn't know if you guys ever experienced any major pushback, because just a month ago I was probably the bestest person in my particular town, and just for everything, confidant for everything. Now, this one issue, I understand the reason I'm a big fan of your show for a long time. I just used to watch him. My spouse used to look, and he didn't like to be challenged, so. I really just started shaking my head and thinking, well, don't they have a point? And then
I don't think you should argue with people. I don't think, based on your situation, I wouldn't recommend telling people why they're wrong and you're correct. That would just make them hate you even more. I think you should.
He's not saying
you're absolutely right.
Yeah. I think don't do that. Just
right.
focus on making people like you. And here's the thing: if you are successful, you're not just doing yourself a favor, you're probably doing other atheists a favor as well, because you're normalizing atheism. If people know you as an atheist and now you go out of your way to try to be nice to them and they have a negative opinion about you right now. If you try to be extra nice and do people favors, if somebody's moving, maybe call them, offer them to help out. If somebody needs a ride, always offer them. Just call people that you haven't talked to and just ask them how they are. Ask them if they need anything. Tell them that you're there for them if they need you. And if this mission is successful, your town might be like, okay, the only atheist guy that I know is super, super nice. So they might have a different perspective over atheists in general, not just you. If you're successful with this mission.
Hey, thank you, Armin. I really appreciate it. I used to think I was one in a billion people, but suddenly I feel like, wow, I'm the only one. So knowing you guys exist, that just makes me happy. I just want to really appreciate the feedback.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
That's one reason why I call it the Atheist Experience, right? We love talking to theists and trying to find out if God really exists and all that. But also, your type of calls are the most important calls I think we do. Let people know that they are not alone, even when they're in your situation where all of a sudden it feels like you really, really are. And no, you're not. We're all over the place. There are probably atheists in your town that may be looking at the situation, wondering what you're going to do, and if they need to live there anymore. So, not to put you on the spot or anything, but you could end up with more friends than you think if you stick around and like Armin said, go on a charm offensive and try that, and hopefully that works, and hopefully people will realize that they were just being silly bigots.
I completely agree. I'm actually watching, and I realized that, after speaking with you guys, I feel a lot better.
Awesome.
Oh,
Glad we could help.
thank you.
And
That's
come
sweet.
back, let us know how it goes.
Okay, I will. Thank you so much. I'll give it a shot with, maybe I'll make some special brownies and bring to my neighbors. Thank you guys again.
All right, thank you.
Tell them if you
Bye.
do that. Thank you.
All right, bye.
Bye. That was
There we
sweet.
go.
I like that.
Yeah. I love when people tell us that. Let's remind us why we need to keep doing this. We could do some super chats right about now. We've got Rainbow Wolf, $5. Thank you, Rainbow Wolf. Says, when fighting for secularism, remember the Barber principle. No single moment can define our victory or our defeat. Reverend William Barber II. I like the fact that he used a preacher's words against him. Very, very true. Not a single moment. It's just constantly getting back up and getting back into the fight. Gayest Husky with $1.99. Hail Emperor Rainbow Wolf, master of the dark side. Okay. And then we've got Kelly Laughlin, $5, who's been a member for 2 years. And I would like to thank Kelly for giving me this. To begin to toboggan, first buy a toboggan, but don't buy too big a toboggan. Too big a toboggan is too big a toboggan to buy to begin to toboggan.
Ooh, I'm so glad that you have to do this and not me.
Thanks, Kelly. And yes, if you want us to try and if you want to turn our tongues into little knots, super chats will do. And then from Eunice and Cleon at $9.99. Thank you for standing up for me and my LGBT community. I am so grateful for your support. Well, we are grateful for your support, both in watching the show and the super chat. And hopefully one day no one will have to stand up for your community because no one's trying to tear it down. And we can all just be one big community and happy. Keep our fingers crossed and keep working because it's going to take some more effort. Isaiah S. for $2, New Jersey represent. Okay, I can't see chat right now, but on YouTube, but hopefully New Jersey is representing, not just in Isaiah. So, and thanks for the super chats, folks. Armin, ready for the next call?
Yes. I just want to make a comment about some people in the live chat that were like, oh, why do you have to appease these bigots who are anti-atheists and you're such a people pleaser and that's like humiliating and stuff like that. Okay, if you are in a small town and you don't have options, we are social animals and we need relationships with other humans. Okay, you cannot just like close your doors and be like, you know what, I don't care about these bigots and maybe you can, but most of us need interaction with other humans, and if our options are limited, we have to just make with what we have, right? So
yep. And also, how do you change someone's mind if they're not willing to talk to you? Right?
Yeah.
You can't. So you have to talk with people, and we are social animals, as you said. So yeah, that's why you go on a charm offensive. That's why you try to be pleasant. It doesn't mean you're bending over backwards necessarily, or just giving up, but it does mean that you got to give them a chance. You got to get them to talk to you, so get them to give you a chance to show them that you're not actually what they think you are. Because remember, there's a whole bunch of really, really bad press that gets thrown around evangelical circles about atheists. And I'll be honest, I make baby eating jokes all the time, but those probably don't help. They're funny, but they don't help. So anyway, Giro in Colorado wants to talk about the existence of God is real, but not physical. So what do you mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, guys, can you hear me good?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, I was thinking of well, I've actually been living this way my whole life, but a set of laws. I also grew up on the guys' show, by the way.
Oh, good.
It's a set of laws. So entropy pretty much, and tell me when I make the fallacy here, entropy pretty much is like the way of the universe, right? Don't you have to like eat, you have to destroy something in order to live. Are you following me so far?
No, because what was destroyed when the Big Bang happened?
Well, I don't think that the Big Bang was the first, was the start of the universe. So, but
well, that's countered everything in science, but that doesn't really answer the question. What was destroyed when that was created? Or let me go to another one. If I nail together two things that have ever been nailed together before, how is that destroying either one of them?
Did you just say you have to nail something?
I said, what if I take two things that have never been nailed together before and nail them together? What was destroyed in that process?
Well, you're using energy to do that, and you're also putting things together that's never been together before. So you're destroying one and one to make, or you're destroying two to make one.
No, they still exist. They're not destroyed. They have not stopped being whatever it was they were. They're just now nailed together. Nothing was destroyed. But they're not destroyed.
In their own form, yeah, I get what you're saying. So I guess you would get me there. What I'm trying to say is that we have to eat in order to survive. We have to devour something in order to live. That's how the digestive tracts work. That's how, I mean.
Yeah, and that's more indicative of a God not existing than a God existing. Yeah, but see, that fact is more evidence of that's evident, not evidence for a God. That's evidence against a omnibenevolent, omnipotent God, right? That we have to eat other things and make other things to suffer.
Right. I don't believe in omnibenevolent God. I don't think omnibenevolence is a thing. I don't think that exists.
Okay, so how does your God? So let's go back to your original of. So we agree that things don't have to be destroyed in order to create something, right?
Yeah. I guess you would have me there.
Yeah. So what's the rest of your point? How do you know that the existence of God is real? What's your evidence for that?
Okay. Well, it's just a basic observation. I look at the world around me and I say, well, damn, we have to. Well, it doesn't. I don't think we have to, but history has taught me that we kill each other, we slaughter animals, we, I don't know.
How's any of that evidence? You're just describing things that happen. How is that evidence of God?
Maybe that's the way of our universe is what I'm saying. Maybe that's how it's supposed to be. Maybe you have to destroy stuff and devour things in order to keep going.
Fine. I'm granting you all that. I'm granting those are your toys. You get to play with them. Granting you all that. How's that evidence of a God?
Maybe that's the laws of the universe in which that's what I call God.
So your God is the God of Spinoza, right? Would that be fair?
The God of Spinoza. No, I wouldn't agree with that. I wouldn't say it's just the universe or something like that. I would say that intentionally these are the laws that we live by because that's how it's supposed to be. If you would think anything else, it could be any other way, right?
Yeah, it could be. It could be, but
Right.
you haven't
And
distinguished
why isn't it?
because that's the way it is. It's not evidence of a God. You're simply describing what is, right? You're not describing how a God. One, why would a God want to do that? You already established he's not omnibenevolent. So why would a God build this universe, right? And then how did he do it? Either one of those questions would be good. But first you got to prove he exists. So you can't take something and automatically assume that a God exists. You just can't do it.
So you said he, and I never once said anything about a he. And then you said, why would it do it? This is a byproduct, in my opinion, this is a byproduct of what is naturally occurring, right? So let's say...
May I jump in?
I want to create... Go ahead. What's up?
Okay. Giro, what do you mean by God?
Okay. It's a set of laws to me, a set of rules, basically.
Okay. Do any
so your
set
God
of
is the
rules
God of
make a
Spinoza.
So Giro,
you
do
guys are
any
talking-
set of rules be... Giro, listen to this question. What set of laws would you call any set of laws God, or like what laws are you specifically talking about? Does it have to be a specific set of laws?
The laws that we live by, so like physics, entropy, thermodynamics.
Okay. Laws of nature. You call it God,
Pretty
right?
much.
Okay.
Pretty much.
Your laws, so your God does exist. I agree with you. I just don't know why you call it God, all right? Because we have a name for what you're referring to, okay? We call the things that you're referring to, we call them the laws of nature, right? That's the name that we have for them. If you want to call, so I agree. I think me and Jim agree with you that the thing that you're telling us that you call God, you say it exists, and I think me and Jim agree with you that they do exist. Okay, so the only disagreement that we have here is whether we should call it God or not. And if you want to call it God, go ahead and call it God, and your God does exist. But here's the thing: if I call my cat, if I name my cat God, then I could also say God exists because I just named my cat God, and now God does exist because my cat is real, right?
Right.
So the question is like, is the word God the best? Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I was going to say, and not to cut you off, but I do understand the punchline is quite funny. Like I said, I watched you guys for about 20 years now. What I was going to say is it's because we are forced to live by these laws. It's not that we have a choice. You can't get up and say gravity doesn't exist. Right.
But that doesn't indicate a God. That we agree with that. The problem is we don't see how you get to a God from there, right? Describing the things that exist doesn't get you to a God.
Right, because it supersedes what you want to happen. It doesn't matter what you want to happen. It supersedes that. So
Giro, here's the thing. We are, me, you, and Jim are on the same page when it comes to the things that exist. Okay. We don't disagree on that. The disagreement is with the use of words. What is the best utility for the definition for the word of God? Like what would be a definition that would give us the highest amount of utility for the usage of the word God, right? So now in the world that
that's what you just said.
Yeah, so we could call it whatever. We could call it God. We could call it X. We could call it I don't know, Armin, if you wanted to, right? And then it doesn't whatever you could call it. But again, I don't recommend calling it whatever because words are supposed to help us with communication, right? And if you use words in a way that most people don't use them, that will make communication very difficult. Because right now, in the world that we live today, when people use the word God, what they're referring to most of the time is a conscious, self-aware the creator
no.
and moderator of the universe, right? And that's what most people mean. That's what most people, when they say God, that's what they're talking about. So if you now use the word God in a different way, that's just going to cause a lot of confusion. We want to, submit to the most used definition so that we could communicate more effectively with each other. Especially, yeah, go on.
Yeah, maybe to the uninitiated, it would mean like some conscious guy sitting somewhere or something like that. No offense to
that's
them,
how
but yeah, that's
Well,
not
do
how
you believe
it's
that?
not.
Yeah. Do you believe your God has free will? Does your God making choices?
Or does nature make any choices?
It's not an answer to my question.
Okay.
That's not an answer to my question. Does your God have free will?
Okay,
Does he make choices?
if nature does, then yes.
Yeah, it's not really answering the question either, but I take your meaning that no, God does not have free will. God doesn't have a choice. Does your God care about being worshipped?
Absolutely not.
Does your God care about people sacrificing things to it?
No.
Does your God have a preferred people?
No.
Your God is the God of Spinoza, and it's useless. So what? Why do I care that you think God is the universe?
It's not the God of Spinoza because it's a set of rules that you're forced to be. You're forced to
Yeah,
use.
that is the God of Spinoza. That is the God of Spinoza. You need to go look it up. That is the God of Spinoza.
I studied God Spinoza for a long time here. This is the reason why I'm at where I'm at now. It's not that I can just call it anything or whatnot. It's a set of physical laws that you're subjected to.
Giro, what's the problem?
You can call it
Giro,
the water.
what's the problem with just calling them laws of nature? Why do you want to insist? Like what you're saying, what you're referring to is the laws of nature, right? So why not just use that? If you say laws of nature, people will know what you're talking about. Why do you insist on using this other word that people use for something else?
Because you're subjugated to have to use them. It's not a choice.
So what? That doesn't say that's not a reason. That's a fact, but it's not a reason for me to all of a sudden change my language to God, which has a definition that doesn't fit what you're using it for, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Maybe we got to change our definitions then. I mean, it happens before,
Why?
right?
Why?
Because that definition is insufficient.
The definition of the laws of nature or the universe is insufficient. I mean, it works for everybody else, but you're the only person who it doesn't work for. You're the only person who doesn't work for.
Right. The definition of it being a conscious being that is personally in your life and all this other stuff. It personally, it like grants you favors and things of that nature.
Yes, that's what most people mean by God. You're the only person who thinks we need to expand the definition of God to be synonymous with the universe or the laws of nature. You're the only person who wants to do that. The rest of us are like, we don't need to because we want to keep the distinction so that we know what we're talking about, right?
Because that definition is insufficient to reality. So there's cohesion.
The laws of nature. So hold on. The laws of nature are insufficient. The laws of nature are insufficient to deal with reality.
No, God. He's saying
no.
God. He's saying the word.
That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, the personal God thing is insufficient.
So
yeah,
what?
but so Giro, we have words for also things. Giro, we have words for things that don't exist. For example, the word dragon, the word dragon refers to things that don't exist. You're basically what you're saying is like, okay, dragons are not real. So we should change the definition.
Dragon. Negative.
Oh my God, you know what I mean.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
yeah, I think you're just,
No, Giro.
yeah.
Giro, you know what I'm trying to say, and you're just playing games now. What
Yeah,
about the word
I think
demon?
we're done.
The word demon. We're done. Okay.
Yeah, I think we're
playing
done.
games.
Honestly, yeah, you're just playing games with this. Thanks so much for calling. Maybe call back. There we go. Okay.
Can I just add something? Guys, the way that we measure the utility of the definition of words is the number of people who use that definition. Given that words are supposed to, the utility of words is to communicate, then the number of people who use a certain definition is a measure of the utility of that definition.
Yeah.
One measure at least.
Yeah. And trying to make things that represent different concepts all the same word. If all the colors are blue, there are no colors but blue, right? It just, anyway, I think I got that phrase wrong. Anyway, let's go on to Dawn in California. They want to know what we recommend to study for anti-theism.
Logical fallacies.
Yes.
Okay.
What particular, oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say, what do you mean by anti-theism?
Basically books, atheist books, right? I'm studying, I'm on the undergrad level of studying history, seeking to become an educator. And I'm simply looking for maybe a perspective of human civilization that don't.
Yeah. But what do you mean by anti-theism? When you say anti-theism, are you talking about anything in specific? What do you mean by that?
Specifically, when we come to American history, these things constantly come up in the defining or ideologically, driving documents. Because I'm literally taking a U.S. history seminar right now, and I'm thinking about these things. Right, I'm kind of working on the thesis that argues that there is no such thing as separation of church and state in so-called Western civilization. So basically, from that perspective, my question I have a question and then something I want to add for guidance. So my question is, when we talk about the reliability of the gospel, right? What are we even talking about? Because y'all was just talking about the importance of words and the utility of words and definition. While I was waiting, I looked up, the definition.
Well, let's deal with one topic at a time. Your first topic, separation of church and states, well established, and I would recommend multiple law books on that and history of law on that simple fact. And there's I can't think of his name now. He's been on the show a couple of times, and he is a lawyer and a constitutional scholar at that. But yeah, I would read books by that constitutional scholars. I don't have any in particular because it's not an area that I'm particularly interested in. Armin, do you have any on U.S. constitutional law?
Well, I know the guy you're talking about from Freedom from Religion Foundation. I also am ashamed to say that I forgot his name.
He's no longer with that far
times. Oh, he was on our show a couple of times. And Andrew Seidel. Andrew Seidel.
Yes, thank you.
God. Guys, please don't tell Andrew that we forgot his name. Please, nobody send this video.
It's not like we forgot him. We just couldn't put his name and what we were talking about together. Because I'm old. American Crusade, how the Supreme Court is weaponizing religious freedom, the founding myth, why Christian nationalism is un-American. And despite our not being able to remember his name, we both know Andrew. And he is an excellent constitutional lawyer. And his books are fully cited, so you can go and find where he gets his information from and chase that rabbit hole as far as you want. But yeah, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, so I can't give you anything on those topics. And if you're talking about religion in the history of the U.S., I don't think we should hide that at all. just like we shouldn't hide everything we did to Black Americans and to the Native Americans. We shouldn't hide any of that. We should put it on display so that we know when we screwed up and how we screwed up, and so we don't screw it up again, which is where we're headed down to now, right? So I don't think we should hide that. So when you talk about anti-theism, I think you're talking about how do we actually combat religion in America. And I think the best way to do that is actually study the religions themselves so that you can talk intelligently to whoever about those religions, to whoever you're talking with. Most people sitting in the pew don't think too deeply about it because they are human beings and they have to survive and live. And this is part of the things that they do. And so you need to be somewhat familiar with what they actually do believe. And what's the difference between a Catholic and a Lutheran? You can't talk to a Catholic the same way you would a Lutheran, even though those two religions are fairly close together. In terms of what they actually believe, you have to know what the differences are. So studying religion is a good way to also to find ways to combat it and to be anti-theist. But I'm not a big fan of anti-theism. I am a fan of let's get people thinking critically and encourage people as much as possible to critically think, and everything else falls away, right? Everything else is just a byproduct of getting people to want to think about what is going on in their lives and whether or not what they believe is true, and to understand how their beliefs affect their actions and what the consequences of those actions are. I think that is a much better plan, but that's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I deeply appreciate that, and also for opening
before
up
you go, I do want to recommend that you could, for any type of argument, just learning the logical fallacies. You don't even need a book for that. There's a lot of resources online. On YouTube, for example, there's a lot of videos that goes over the logical fallacies, and if you learn them and learn how to use them effectively without sounding smug, like maybe naming them is not a good idea, just knowing them, but also referring to them without naming them in an argument, that is very, very effective. If you could, instead of just naming logical fallacies, being able to easily explain to somebody why something is a fallacy without even mentioning the word fallacy, that would make you a very, very effective debater, and you will be able to just fight against all forms of nonsensical beliefs, not just let alone religion. So that's one recommendation. And also, it's not just about learning them, because learning the logical fallacies and stuff, that's just easy. But then you require practice, like getting into debates, and also noticing your own fallacies also is very effective if you learn how to do that, if you catch them while you are making them. So that's another very effective tool. Also, I want to recommend a book. There's this book I have. It's a bestseller on Amazon. It's written by this guy named Armin Navabi. It's called Why There's No God. And I did ask permission before mentioning this book from the crew before. So Why There's No God. It was a bestseller. It is a bestseller on Amazon by me, written by me. It's a very, very small book. It's a very short, very easy read. A lot of people will mention that they just managed to read it in just one sitting. Simple responses to 20 common arguments for the existence of God. So I do recommend my own book.
I really appreciate that. Really, really, really appreciate that. And I was taking notes while I was listening. And to keep it brief, also while I was waiting, I looked up, what the definition of gospel is, and and that's where it told me, the revelation of Christ. But then I also looked up the definition of a revelation, and basically, I guess I have to ask y'all, and I'll leave y'all with this question: what exactly are the revelation of Christ?
According to who? Right. Because there's 1,000 different denominations, right?
Okay. Right. Which adds to what you were saying, which is why we learn the history of these things, right? Because we literally couldn't. Wow. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. That's the problem with the Gospels in general, right? There are a number of contradictions in the Bible for which there are apologetics. But when you go look at the apologetics, it's stuff they're reading into the Bible. And these are coming from people who believe that they're taking the Bible literally, and yet they can't. One of those is the Passover meal. When did Jesus eat the Passover meal with his disciples, or was he executed on Passover? And you have three gospels that claim that he ate Passover, and you have one gospel that says that he was executed on Passover. And that gospel is the Gospel of John. Why? Because John makes a big deal of Jesus being the sacrificial lamb. In order to be a sacrificial lamb, you've got to be executed on Passover. Now, there's an entire apologetic that goes into how people thought about time and all this other stuff, but it doesn't really address the question of why would these two things be so different if you're going to take the Bible literally, and because you can't. There's a lot of things with the Bible. So and it's multiple guess. You have people who claim the Bible is anti-slavery, and yet we can quote quite a few passages that say it is. That's the problem with the Bible. It's multiple guess, and all the answers are correct.
Don, if what Jim is telling you right now, if you find that interesting, then I would recommend lectures by Bart Ehrman, which you should be able to find easily. Mm-hmm. That will, if that level of detail in analyzing the Bible is something that you're curious about, that's one resource you should look into. Bart Ehrman, he's amazing. If I had time, I would spend more time like watching his lectures. They're fascinating.
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman.
Yeah.
Bart Ehrman. Okay. All right. And then also, if I may, y'all had two other discs that spoke to kind of the LGBT community, and basically I would describe, I think they talked about what I would describe as a retrogression. And I came up with this I was writing a paper evaluating. It's very short and succinct, and I want to see if y'all feel that this coordinates with what my two other community members of the LGBT community were talking about. I said, though semantic contradiction ails this evaluation, America, the independent colonial North American economy, represents the most advanced form of colonial politics. Semantic contradiction, in fact, locks Euro-American thought, the birth child of Western civilization, in an auto-cannibalistic retrogression.
I would actually have to take some time to unpack what you just said, because I'm not entirely sure what precisely you just said. If you could send that to me, and I will be happy to respond offline, unfortunately, so I can actually figure out exactly what you were talking about. And I apologize for that, but there was something there. I just don't know what precisely it is. So
basically kind of like how y'all was talking about how society is kind of retrogressing based in, you know what I'm saying? And I was doing my best to, academically speak to that.
Right. I'm not an academic. I'm a software engineer. But yeah, I think we are regressing. Yes. I think we're going backwards faster than we think we are. And it's a horrifying thought.
Yeah.
Yes. I want to thank y'all for the time in the community that you're providing, and also the resources and whatnot. And thank y'all.
All right. Thanks, Don. Have a good day.
I think if we zoom out, if we zoom out, we're not regressing. If we zoom in the past, like a couple of years, we're regressing. But if you look at a more zoom out picture, it seems like I think we're doing good.
We'll see what happens in the next election. But yeah, we can make that distinction. And we've got some more super chats to read. Bobby Berberian with $1.99. Natural versus supernatural. I would need a definition of supernatural and precisely what you mean by that. Because as far as I know, we only have the natural, and supernatural's never been proven. or demonstrated to actually exist.
Supernatural doesn't even mean anything. If you manage to discover something outside of nature, well, technically that will now be part of nature. Like, I don't understand.
Right.
Supernatural doesn't even mean anything. I don't understand. If you manage to be able to detect, if you detect it, that will make it part of nature because you managed to detect it. And if you can't detect it, then how do you know it's there if you can't detect it?
Yeah. Yeah, so we need a little bit more than that, but anyway, maybe that's what you wanted, Bobby. I don't know. Next up is Fennec Wolfox for $2. I hereby name the super chat God. Okay, now God exists.
Okay, I'm a believer.
God is our super chat. Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Amen, brother. Preach it. And then Miranda Rensberger, who's been a member for a month, sent us $5 and says, how does anyone think that changing definitions will change what people actually believe? Absolute nonsense. I completely agree. Not only is it nonsense, it's dishonest. I was listening to a YouTube video with J Mike's partner on their channel, Cease to Know, and some Muslim apologists. And he asked them what they meant by a particular word, and they gave him their definition. He says, well, that's not a standard definition. The standard definition is blah. And they said, okay, we'll use that. And he said, or you just said, no, we'll use yours. And they never really, and then they came out later and said that they had almost convinced an atheist that God was real. And the real thing that happened was they changed the definition. And then when he agreed to something by that definition, they said that was close to God. And it was like, no, that's not what he said. That's not what he meant. It was entirely dishonest. And that's the other problem you have with trying to change words around with people is you can claim that they said something they never said simply because, and we also saw that with Dawkins too, right? Where Dawkins was the victim of a similar
Einstein, Hawkins, Stephen Hawkins as well. Many examples.
Yeah, people doing things like that and doing it with the purpose of deceiving, not necessarily the person they're talking to, but everyone they're talking that sees that or what they can claim. So it's not honest at all.
That's why I always make the cat argument. Like, if I call my cat God, now there is a God because I can see my cat exists. That's why when I say that, I think like it would be hard for them to use any agreement that I have with them that their God exists because I made that cat argument. It will be harder for them to just portray what I said as a acceptance of their existence of their God.
Yeah. All right. On to the next caller, who is Carson in Oklahoma. How you doing, Carson? Carson? We can't hear you.
Hello.
Don't know hey.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Hey, Jim. How are you doing?
Doing okay. Got Armin here with me as well.
Hey, Armin. How are you doing?
Good.
All right.
What do you got?
You want to talk about navigating? Pardon?
There's a delay, so I'm going to wait and let you finish.
No, go ahead. You said you want to talk about navigating sobriety groups as an atheist.
Yes, that is exactly what I wanted to talk about. I'm going through some sobriety hurdles here, and I can't help but struggle with the issues, like when I'm going to meetings and things like that. People are constantly talking about. This is a little hard for me. Sorry. People are constantly talking about finding their higher power and things like that, and I don't really love the way that they talk about it, but I can't seem to find my way around those types of meetings and things like that. And I was wondering if you guys just had any advice. Like, I don't want to take too much time, but it's a struggle for me lately. So I was hoping you guys might have a little something to say.
The only thing I can really do is recommend seculartherapy.org, the Secular Therapy Project. They might be able to steer you towards a more secular-oriented sobriety group or organization. That be at the very least, they might be able to do that. Same thing for like recovering from religion. Either of those organizations would be able to steer you more towards a secular group. Are you in a big city, or are you out in the rural areas?
I am in one of the largest cities in the region as far as like land mass goes. That's Oklahoma City.
Right. Okay.
It's a big wide city, but there's not a lot of people.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a lot of hope being in Oklahoma. You've got a couple of atheists out there. So. Yeah, there's a couple of atheists out there. I know that. The thinking atheist, Seth Andrews, is, of course, from your neck of the woods. And I'm sure there are more out there. I went to an event out there that had quite a few atheists show up. So I would be interested, maybe by talking to those folks, they might know some organizations. And then also Atheist Community of Discord and our chat channels on Facebook, our Facebook pages would also be some good resources to go and find some, to go ahead to find some of those organizations. And maybe if you find an organization but they don't have a chapter in your area, maybe that's something you want to do and look into. I don't know. But other than that, I don't know that, higher power can pretty much mean whatever you want it to mean. And that could just mean the self you want to be, right? You could just translate higher power into the person I want to be. And what would, whatever they're doing to the higher power, you could just do to that self that you're trying to be. And I think we all have a self we're trying to be, whether we're recovering from addiction or not. But that might work. I don't know. What do you think?
That's what I've tried a lot, is to apply my own definition to it. I just feel, even if I do that, going to a lot of these meetings, there is kind of an overarching, not necessarily Christian, but religious perspective. And trying to come at this from a much more, scientific and a much more humanist perspective, I just really struggle with that terminology specifically. I think I'm definitely like a descriptivist when it comes to that. And so the way that they're using it really affects how I am perceiving that word or that terminology. Right. So I don't know. I've struggled with it, and I was just curious to see what everyone thought. But also, like anyone else out there struggling, just know you're not alone. Love you guys.
Yeah.
Go
ahead, Armin.
Go ahead, Jim. No, I just want to say I haven't had experience with this, but even with somebody like me that hasn't had any experience with this, I have come across so many people in the atheist community asking about this and referring each other. So I know there's a lot of resources for atheists out there. Like, given that somebody like me that hasn't been involved in any of this before, like how many times have come across this, there is like online, like the number of resources people keep recommending with each other, and so many people are trying to provide an alternative to all these other ones that many atheists don't like. So I don't know how hard you've looked, but I know for a fact that there are a lot of atheists out there trying to provide support for other atheists when it comes to this. So know that there are alternatives out there. And I know that maybe even if you're in an area where there's not that many, atheists, I just know there's a lot of online communities, online supports, people meeting with each other online, face to face. So I don't know if that helps at all or not, but I'm pretty sure if you keep looking, you will be able to find those resources. And like Jim also referred you a lot of good ones.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a big one, Armin, is the online aspect of things. Like I'm really been focusing on the in-person meetings, and being that I am in Oklahoma City, there is definitely just an undertone with all that. I think that in-person has been a big part of my recovery, and like trying to go to those meetings and things like that, just to connect with people and to try to have community in that way. I've been going to Buddhist meetings, mostly because I very much like mindfulness meditation. But other than that, I don't really believe in a lot of the tenets that they put forward necessarily. But I find the Buddhist meetings to be a lot more palatable, I guess you could say, than like AA or other meetings like that. So
can you
anyway?
Can you also maybe start a group yourself? Like, is that an option?
I think it is theoretically. The like jumping to the actually getting it done is definitely the hurdle there.
Right.
Right.
I mean, if you manage to do that, that would maybe help a lot of people like yourself. So consider doing that.
Yeah, you're right, Armin. That might help a lot of people like myself.
Yeah. And hopefully it doesn't interfere with you staying sober and staying on track.
It might keep your mind busy as well. If you have to do that, I don't know, maybe it will keep your mind busy enough to, I don't know, actually, I shouldn't say anything because I don't know how this works. So, but it might help.
Yeah.
Because you have a goal or something. But anyways, thank you, Carson. Was this helpful at all? I mean, Jim gave you a lot of good resources.
Yeah, it was.
So I hope this was,
Yeah, honestly, I do need to get onto the Discord. I try to avoid some of it sometimes just for my own mental health, trying to argue online or be a part of some groups that make me argumentative. But I'll definitely try to pop on there and see what people are talking about or saying.
Cool.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks for calling, Carson. Good luck to you.
Yep. Bye.
Okay. Yeah, I wish we had more resources off the top of our heads, but I don't at the moment. So, and then we have Marco in Holland, who wants to know if God is based on lack of knowledge and natural phenomena, why are there still believers? Hey, Marco, how's it going?
I'm fine. How are you?
Doing good.
Okay. Yeah, the question I had was basically, at least from my understanding, as you guys explained before, in the old days, people saw lighting, didn't know what it was, and basically came up with a God explanation. And at some time, that lighting was explained scientifically, but new questions came up, and I think people use them to believing, and I don't exactly understand why people do that.
Well, I mean, I think that it's not just about trying to explain natural phenomena. I think for most people, their religious views, it's a membership card and an identity card. And it doesn't really, for most people, for I shouldn't say most, for a huge number of people, I think even if you come up with, it's a lot of us atheists, when we look at religious people and we try to explain to ourselves why they believe what they do, we are doing a little bit of a projection because we look at ourselves and we are, a lot of us are people who are trying to have beliefs that it's a reflection of objective reality as close as it could be. And we assume that other people are trying to do the same thing. But a lot of people, their beliefs, they choose their belief, or they have their beliefs because it gives them membership to the community that they are in. And it's an identity. It also gives them a sense of identity. It's their identity card. So if they change their belief, it's not just changing their view of the world. It also means that they now no longer belong to that community. And that is pretty scary. And also how they see themselves, the identity that they had, all of a sudden we're stripping that away from them. And that's also very scary. That's why many people hold on to their beliefs. It's not because they're answering questions like, oh, how did the world came about? Okay, this gives me the answers. They're like, no, I have these beliefs because this is the belief of my people. And I am one of those people.
And the other side of that is like with the Catholic Church says that, science is figuring out how God did it. And so no matter what science comes up with, God is at the root of it, right? So, yeah, we now know how lightning works, but that doesn't, God set that process in place, right? He created the universe. So everything that happens is because of him. That's kind of the Catholic. And a lot of people do that or have that belief as well. So they're looking at science and going, science is just explaining how God does things. And that's how they get around it. And then you've got, of course, the evangelicals who reject any science that disagrees with their Bibles. So you've got those folks as well.
Yeah, I understand the I would say I understand the mechanism where I would say if you are afraid of losing your membership, are you really a believer or are you just desperate to get into a club? The one thing I think about
Marco, just a second. We're all desperate to be in a club. Okay, this is how the human brain mostly operates. Okay, we're social animals. It's one of our basic needs to be included in a club, and that's why a lot of atheists don't understand that if they want to convince people out of religion, it's not just about showing them why these arguments don't make sense. You have to provide alternative communities. You have to provide alternative identities. I mean, not necessarily it doesn't have to be atheist communities or atheist identities, but there has to be alternative communities and alternative identities for people, or else it's just too hard. We're emotional creatures. You can't expect us to just be purely logical. We are emotional creatures, animals, and one of our emotions that is very, probably one of the most important ones is our ego, is our self of, it's the way how we see ourselves from the eyes of other members of our species. It matters to us so much. In fact, once our basic needs are met, nothing matters to us more than how the other members of our tribe see us. This is not just about religious people. This is about humans in general.
Yeah, okay. And maybe because I'm from Holland and the level of religion here is far lower than I would say in America. And I'm listening to your show, and so my perspective as in America, it's predominantly Christian in some sorts. So from that perspective, I now understand, okay, if everybody around you is Christian, then it's more difficult. And here it's very rapidly declining. So maybe my perspective is not correct from let's say the membership point of view.
Yeah, and Australia's got the same issue there with Christianity that we do in some ways. And yeah, it's a cultural thing, and that is always a problem when you've got to fight culture as well as ideas.
Yeah, and I have one other question that maybe because I love you guys, all of you, but you are very into the religion as an atheist. One of the things, and I think I was quite young, but what I realized is that I would say all religions all over the world have a solution for death. And for me, that was the common denominator for all religions. Whether you reincarnate or go to heaven, go to whatever place, go to your ancestors, every religion has a solution for that. And what I don't understand is that, let's say, people don't see that in general as, okay, and basically, I think you take a similar argument and saying, okay, you are atheist for all other beliefs except your own. And I would say the same is for, I would say, the death solution. All religions have a death solution, which might not be similar to your religion. But why is that? And I think that's also the inability of man to imagine what happens when you're dead. And if you're not able to imagine it, then you fill it in.
I don't think it's necessarily a solution. I just think, like, when it comes to evolutions of memes, the ones that manage to provide a lot of reward at a point where you cannot see whether you get the reward, and you cannot come back to claim that you have not gotten the reward. It was just such a useful meme. It just for the survival of that meme, it just did so much that it's not a solution for us. It's really a solution for that religious meme to survive. It just makes sense for why, when it comes to taking advantage of what motivates humans, providing a lot of reward, but promising a lot of reward, but making sure that the reward period is at a time that you're too dead to claim it. It just makes, because when it comes to different political systems or different rulers having to motivate people, they actually have to provide real rewards. This is obviously a perfect solution for a meme to get the maximum benefit out of the members of that tribe, without needing to provide the material rewards for the members of that tribe. So it's not really a solution for the individual, it's a solution for the survival of that religion.
Yeah, but it's been around in any religion. If you do,
because it works. Because it works for the survival of that religion. It's just such a powerful tool for the religion to survive. Because that's why it has been there for every religion. It's just too powerful not to use.
Yeah, okay. It's not a solution. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a tool. It's a very effective tool.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah. Well, there's a part of me that sometimes thinks that some of religion gets started because a 3-year-old asked too many questions and a parent got tired of answering. And so they came up with a story to give an answer and to shut the child up. And I think for something like all of the heavens and afterlife is so that you don't have to tell a child the truth about reality and that people died and never talk to them again. Which is, again, a very parent thing to do to their children. I have nothing to back that up. That's just me, spitballing an idea that I sometimes think about. Parents wanting to protect their children and doing so with a story, and that story gets believed and passed on and passed down until it becomes part of what we now call a religion. There's probably a small drop of truth in that, but I wouldn't give it any more than that. But it's something else to think about, I think.
That's a good one. I honestly think that's I'm not sure. I haven't had similar discussions with my children, but I can understand the explanation you give.
But Marco, I just want to add something else that I think about a lot. It might not be what you asked for. It's a bit futuristic and science fiction, but because I think about it, I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to mention this, okay? I'm going to use the word if, so people don't accuse me of saying, like, you don't know this is going to happen. Yeah, if, okay? If at some point the humans figure out how to defeat death, okay? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if we at some point get to a point where death is not reality anymore and we have figured out a way to defeat it, right? Then, if that is a possibility, then the belief in an afterlife has been one of the most costly beliefs ever imagined. Just focusing on this, because we have been satisfied with the idea that we're going to live forever anyways. So this solution of actually defeating death has now been delayed by so many years, something that was achievable because we didn't have the motivation to get it, because we were satisfied, because we're going to live forever anyways. And so many people that ended up dying did not need to have died, could have lived forever, but because of that delay, they're now dead. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand. I would say my personal question. Well, my personal idea is, at least, I don't want to live forever.
Yeah, but you get, but yes, but that would be an option. Like maybe one day that would be an option. Like I think people who don't want to live forever shouldn't live forever, but people who might want to should have that option at some point.
Well, I would. That's maybe another topic, but for me, if I look at how populated the Earth already is, I would say people should die because we're running out of space.
The problem is the other way around. I'm not going to get into that topic, but we're not suffering from overpopulation. We're suffering from underpopulation, but that's a different topic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys.
All right. Well, thanks. Thanks, Marco.
You shuffled my ideas, which I like, and I have a different perspective now. That's good.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Some of my.
Yeah. So how do you get we're underpopulated?
Well, I mean, it's country by country, but in most countries right now, so this idea of overpopulation is showing to be a myth. If you actually look at the studies, there are specific countries that are suffering from overpopulation, some poor countries, but most countries, their economic development is actually shown to be both correlated and caused with having a very young working population. So if the problem is not just the number in population, is also the demographics of the population. So any population that is declining in number is going to have more old people that are not working, that are costly to the economy of the country, that you need to spend money on them. But if any population that is increasing basically has a working, productive demographic that is also adding to the tax revenue and also producing a lot more. So every country's economy is working, is growing faster if they have a growing population. So if you actually look at countries right now, countries like Japan, China, South Korea, many European countries, they're very, very much, their problem right now, their economy is devastated because of not having enough people. It's not because they have too many people. China has learned this the hard way, that they need to actually increase their population, not reduce their population. Japan and South Korea are devastated right now. They're trying to increase their population. Their economy is going to suffer a lot if they kind of come up with a solution for this. Even in Africa, countries like a lot of the countries that are growing is because they have a high population. Like, for example, Nigeria has a huge population, and that's working in their advantage because they have a very young demographic. So yeah, and look at Europe. Europe is now desperate to find a way to increase their population in their countries. So it's a myth. A lot of people think overpopulation is bad for the economy and progress. It's actually the other way around.
Yeah, and I know we could produce a lot more food than we do, especially if it wasn't for capitalism. But yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to look into that quite a bit. But you were talking about wanting to live forever, and I was remembering the TV show Altered Carbon, which deals with that topic somewhat tangentially, where it's only the rich who can do it, and it's only the super rich who can continue to keep buying the technology it takes to live forever in the same body, even because it's all very expensive. And that if we get to that point, we need to make sure that it's not just the rich who get to do it; it's whoever needs to or wants to.
So I think technology's prices I think I don't believe that premise in that from that show. I think technology at first, only in initial phases, is going to be so expensive that the rich could afford it. I think technology has a habit of reducing in price very, very, very fast. Like when smartphones came, like only rich people could afford it. But right now, it just the drop in the price is just so fast, and I think it's even going to speed up. Like technologies. With AI, with all these other advancements, whatever technology that we come in, it's only going to be the initial phase that rich people could only afford.
Right. Except that we're looking at the medical costs skyrocketing and going up more and more rather than coming down despite technology. So it'd be interesting. Yeah. The future could be interesting on that one way or the other, because we both have, I think there are two very valid points. Technology makes things cheaper, and giving people more access makes companies richer. On the other hand, we see medical technology and medical services skyrocketing, at least in this country. So
that's the point. That's the thing in that country, because of the way things are structured, not because that's not worldwide. The prices are dropping for things. So it's that's just a US centric experience. Yeah.
Yeah, probably very true. We have one last, I don't know if it's two or one. I'm going to assume that it is one. Michael Bell, member 1 month, who gave us $2, says mythicism or no. My answer is I don't really care. We have the same problem whether Jesus was a myth or not. It doesn't change the reality we're dealing with today at all. What do you think, Armin?
Right. Because I'm not an expert, I'm just going to appeal to credible authority. And based on what I have seen, most non-religious Bible scholars think that the stories are based on something that happened. There was a guy. So almost everything that has been said about the guy, and everything that is claimed that the guy has said, seems to be just made up. Like the vast majority of it is being made up. But most biblical scholars think that there was an initial person that started the stories. So I'm just going to appeal to credible authority.
Yeah, that works for me. Yeah. All right. So let's remember that the prompt for this week is complete the sentence. It was cringe when God blank. Get your answer in the comments, and it might be read at the beginning of next week's episode. And once again, I'd just like to thank our crew, these wonderful folks who do so much so that we don't have to. So Armin and I can basically be lazy talking heads and talk to whoever we want. There they are. Thank you guys so much. We really do appreciate it. And of course, Justin, who answers all of our email. Thank you, Justin, as well for doing that. That is truly a thankless job, having read those emails. Some of them are quite horrifying. I'm hoping one of these days he'll get me some of his worst and send them to me. I'll read you just how mind-scarring some of these can be. And they can be quite bad. But on that note, thanks, Armin. Always a lot of fun. We're going to be here next week, 4:30 p.m. Central, on Sunday.
Yes. Well, make sure you subscribe and like the stream.
Yes.
Do that.
What will it take for you to start opening your eyes, to start questioning the bullshit everyone around you buys? You think it's setting up your business, what goes on between my thighs? I wonder when we'll be rid of your life.
Watch Talk Heathen live Sundays at 1 p.m. Central. Visit tiny.cc/YTTH and call into the show at 512-991-9242 or connect to the show online at tiny.cc/callth.